Happy Monday, everybody. Spring practice and spring games have officially come to an end within the Big Ten Conference, and now the big old void between the end of spring practice and the kickoff of fall camp. There's a big 3-month gap in the middle there, and now that the spring portal, maybe some of these commitments are starting to wrap up a little bit, but there is a little bit of the finishing touches on some of these rosters. But for the most part, we kind of know what they're going to look like, and the Big Ten is kind of shaping up as to who could maybe stand out and who certainly got a ways to go. I've got 4 big macro Big Ten questions that I want to ask in this edition of Big Nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
You know what I love about spring? The optimism. The optimism that it really provides. The weather is starting to get warmer, for all of us cold-ish weather schools, basically everyone except USC and UCLA down there on the sunny beaches of Southern California. There's a lot of optimism in the air. You're starting to just feel better. You're starting to feel a little bit more motivated, and then that kind of translates over to spring practice. Well, on your favorite message board or your favorite media outlet, you're starting to get practice reports yet again. You're starting to kind of see some of these new players that are supposed to bloom in the upcoming 2025 season and seeing, hey, this player is trending, or this player is doing really good in practice, or this transfer is really stepping up into a leadership role, and you kind of get into a rhythm. They're doing 2 practices a week, and they're doing 3 practices a week, and then the spring game comes. If you're one of the lucky schools that has 11-on-11 football, you really get to see players go against each other in a live game situation and see who really starts to stand out in that setting. And then bam, it all comes to an end. Believe me, I love summer as much as the next guy, but this is really a big void within the college football calendar right now, because fall camp at the end of July and early August seems like a long ways away. Rosters are really starting to be a lot more clear. The pictures of what these Big Ten teams in 2025 is really starting to come into form a little bit. I've got 4 macro Big Ten questions that I want to ask. I won't maybe have the answers to all of them, but I certainly want to pose them. The first question that I have, as it stands right now, which Tier 1 team in the Big Ten is best set up for a national championship run in 2025? Let's make one thing perfectly clear. Tier 1 is very solidified. There's a block of 3 teams certainly at the top. The defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, the defending Big Ten champion in the Oregon Ducks, and the Penn State Nittany Lions, maybe one of the most experienced and national championship favorites out of all of these schools here in the Big Ten as we look forward to this 2025 season. So I think that's one important thing certainly to establish. Like, these are the playoff teams that I feel really good about, that have the rosters, that have the coaching, that have a great perspective towards this 2025 season. Let's start first with the defending national champions, those scarlet and gray Buckeyes from Columbus, Ohio. When I look at this Ohio State team, and there's a lot to replace. There's a lot that's being lost, no question about that, not only on the coaching staff, but also those 11 guys playing between the lines as well. But when I look at this Ohio State team and their perspective for a national championship, you have 2 guys, one on either side of the football, that could just utterly take over a game. They've got 2 of the best players in college football. There's an argument, maybe they've got the 2 best players in college football. Of course, on offense, for my money, he is the best player in the entire country, that being number 4. That being Jeremiah Smith, the absolute freak of nature that he is. It's insane. It's unfair. It is a competitive advantage for the Buckeyes that he has not only 1, but 2 years of eligibility remaining before he can go off to the NFL. And then you've got Caleb Downs on the other side of the ball. He's the top safety in college football. We saw in that semifinal against Texas the type of plays that he can make at big times. How about that punt return last year against Indiana for a touchdown? The last punt return for a touchdown in a very long time for that Ohio State team. So both of these guys can certainly make plays, and having both of these guys on this team is going to keep Ohio State in this national championship picture. But this team is losing a lot. Like the formula for Big Ten teams the last 2 years has been, hey, let's bring back a bunch of experienced players that have been around for years, that have kind of built some chemistry, and let's go all in for a championship. That's what Ohio State was last year, a lot like what Michigan was in 2023. I'm sure both of those fan bases love to hear that comparison that I keep on making. But this is a team that's losing Trevion Henderson. They're losing Quinshon Judkins. They're losing Will Howard at quarterback. You're losing your entire defensive line. Like, you're losing a lot of great players. You're losing your defensive coordinator. Jim Knowles is going over to Penn State. You're losing your offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, who's now the OC at the NFL's Las Vegas Raiders. Like, no matter how good you are and no matter how good of a factory you are, like Ohio State is, losing that much is certainly going to have an effect on you, especially early in this. Like, when I look at Ohio State, game number 1 might be against the best college football team in America, and that being the Texas Longhorns. Like, that is going to be a huge measuring stick, exactly where this Ohio State team is in terms of, hey, can this team possibly go back-to-back and hoist the trophy when all is said and done? Like, this Ohio State team, I think, is going to look a little bit different. That might be a Captain Obvious, certainly a type of statement, but when you look at the quarterback and the coordinator, Julian Sayin is likely to win the quarterback battle over Lincoln Kienholz in Columbus. Brian Hartline is the first-year offensive coordinator, never called plays before. Formerly the wide receivers coach, we know how good that position has certainly been over there at Ohio State. So even that's going to take some time, I think, to develop. Even though I love both of those guys, I think both of those guys are going to be stars at their respective position. It's still going to take some time. And like I said, starting things off with a great Texas team, you know, that's certainly a high bar to clear right out of the gate. I think that this team, Ohio State, has the potential to be like an absolutely nasty passing attack. With Julian Sayin, he's a 5-star talent. Okay, if he can really get up to speed, like, I feel like I could throw for like 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns within this Ohio State offense. So he's going to have all of the weapons to deal with, and he's got a lot of talent. Once he kind of gets in there and learns and kind of works off kind of some of the things that don't work, I think this Ohio State offense is going to be slinging it. Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Innes and Carnell Tate, Max Clare, the pass-catching tight end that comes over from Purdue. Like, this is going to be an absolutely dirty receiving group. They're going to be extremely tough to defend. It's going to be pick your poison. The run game is not as good as it was a year ago. You bring in C.J. Donaldson, who transfers over from West Virginia. You got James Peoples back there, but I think the run game is going to be a little bit more of a complement this season. Having Brian Hartline as your offensive coordinator, I think, just plays more into how much of a heavy passing attack that this is going to be. I mentioned the defensive line before. Now, you have guys like JT Tuimoloau that played for, it seems like 3 years there. Jack Sawyer was a big part. Tylik Williams. Like, these are multi-year guys that had the experience. You got, I think, really good guys coming in, but that was an elite defensive line. I don't know, was it a generational offensive line? I don't know, but it wreaked a whole lot of havoc certainly last season. You've got guys like Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson. You've got an edge rusher that's transferring over from North Carolina that's going to be really good. Just how good are they going to be? Because that defensive line for Ohio State last year just came up big in so many big spots last season. if they don't have that pass rush, if they don't maybe have the guys that are going to be able to wreak havoc consistently at a higher level as they have maybe last year and the year before, how exactly is this Ohio State team going to be able to hang around in some of these games? Like their schedule, I mentioned Texas is on there, Penn State is on there, a road game at Illinois could be a little bit tricky, Michigan is on there. We know that they have not been able to defeat them, but this is an Ohio State team that I think can, in a one-game scenario, can certainly give any other team in college football a whole lot of trouble, but it's going to be a very new-look squad, certainly in Columbus, Ohio. Let's talk about Penn State. For maybe as much as being lost with the scarlet and gray, the blue and white are bringing everybody back. They're bringing everybody back. They are built in that mold like 2023 Michigan, like 2024 Ohio State, 2025 Penn State is that type of team. Drew Aller's back, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton are back. You've got pretty much the entire offensive line is back. Dennis Sutton is back. Like, they've got good linebackers. They've got good defensive backs. Like, this is a really, really good Penn State team. Bringing in Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator. They are very clearly loading up to make a run for a national championship in 2025. I think the big question for me, because we know where they've been. Penn State has been like the 10-win team, 10-2. They can't get over Ohio State. They can't get over whatever team, Oregon in the Big Ten championship game last year. Michigan has certainly been a roadblock for them prior to the expansion and the 18-team Big Ten. Like, there's always been some sort of roadblock for Penn State in the way. The big question for the Nittany Lions, can they get over the roadblock? Can they win the big games? For Drew Aller, can you make the big plays when they are needed the most? I think the best game of Drew Aller's career came in a loss to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. I thought that he made certainly some key plays down the stretch in that game, but look at how he's played in 2 games against Ohio State. Look at how he did not play great in the college football playoff. All those games. All 3 of those games. Did not make the right decision at the end of the game against Notre Dame that might have cost them a national championship when all was said and done. So I think the thing that I really want to see out of Drew Aller specifically is that he steps up in these big-time situations. Penn State has a home game against Oregon in late September. They got to play Ohio State. So the schedule is kind of shaping up very similarly as to how it's shaped up in the past. Where, all right, you got 2 big games on the schedule. Go out and win them. They haven't won them in years past. Can James Franklin and this Nittany Lions team kind of shake off the bugaboo and really take this thing to the next level? That's what they're aiming to do. I think not having Tyler Warren on this team is probably as big a loss as any in the Big Ten. He was such a focal point of their offense and a focal point of their passing game. I personally think it's going to flip over. These 3 transfer wide receivers that they're bringing in, I think, are expected to bolster this team. Like, that's a big part. If you want to be able to beat Oregon, if you want to be able to beat Ohio State, you're going to need some playmakers to make some plays on the outside. We know that they're going to run the football. We know that they're going to have one of the best run games in the entire country, but you need to be able to be balanced to be able to go all the way to a national championship. Personally, I probably think Penn State is maybe the team that's most equipped to make a run for a national championship, maybe most complete. That doesn't mean they will, though. I want to finish things off with the Oregon Ducks. This was an Oregon team last year that was fairly experienced, maybe looking to load up and make a run. We all know how this thing ended on New Year's Day in the Rose Bowl. This is an Oregon team that is extremely young. This is an Oregon team that is extremely talented. We talked about Julian Sayin at quarterback for Ohio State. We talked about Drew Aller at quarterback for Penn State. I think there's a potential. I think there's hype behind Dante Moore, maybe not right away, but at the end of the season, when we get to November, that he's the best quarterback out of all 3 of these guys. And maybe he's the best quarterback in the Big Ten. He has that much pure talent. You combine him with Will Stein. I think it's been huge that Dante Moore transferred in at the beginning of last season. He's sat and he's learned, and I think that takes a lot of maturity to be able to kind of accept something like that. But I think it's very clear that he wants to put himself into a situation to be able to really soar. You've had guys that have said, hey, he's going to win the Heisman. He's going to be in the Heisman type of conversation. He's that good. And DeCorian Moore, the true freshman, is an absolute freakazoid. We've had Ryan Williams come through as a freshman receiver. We've had Jeremiah Smith come through. I think DeCorian Moore is kind of in that same line as true freshman wide receivers that are going to come in year one and have close to 1,000 yards. Whispers out of Eugene, Oregon say, oh, he's wide receiver one. Not necessarily, maybe not Evan Stewart, who's returning, coming off of a really good season. No, it's DeCorian Moore. You throw in one of the best tight ends in America over there in Kenyon Sadiq. And you've got an absolutely insane offense. Mekhi Hughes in there at running back has had a couple of over 1,000-yard seasons over there at Tulane. And he just looks like an absolute monster back there in the backfield. They've got 3 running backs that can get it done. Their offensive line, they're bringing in a good amount of transfers, so we'll see how that gels together. We know at the beginning of last season for the Ducks, it kind of took a few games for them to really get on the same page, but they had a great offensive line when all was said and done towards the end of the season. On defense, I think the defensive line is deeper. I don't know if it's better. We'll see. They just had a first-round draft pick in Derek Harmon. But you had Jordan Birch and Jamari Caldwell. All 3 of them were top 90 picks in the NFL draft. But you've got a lot of youth coming in. Like in the secondary, you got Dylan Thieneman transferring over from Purdue. Other than that, I think there's a lot of stars in the room. Stars meaning recruiting stars that want to develop into Saturday stars. I think when all is said and done. But this is an Oregon team where I'm not sure if in the beginning of the season, they've that late September matchup against Penn State, if we're really going to see what this Oregon team is. I think this is a team that will really evolve and show who they really are towards the end of the season. That's when these young players are going to get 9 games under their belt. 10 games under their belt, 11 games under their belt, and that's when we're really going to see. I think this is a team that's built to finish strong. I think Oregon, in terms of a championship run, is maybe built more for 2026 than they're built for 2025. 2025 is a damn good football team, though, right now. But these are the 3 teams that are going to be in contention for a national championship. You could realistically sell me on reasons why all 3 of these teams could win a title. And here's to hoping one of them does, so the Big Ten can take home 3 national championships in a row. Now, we're talking about the college football playoff, and those 3 are solidified, where we feel like, all right, those are going to be the teams that we feel for sure are most likely 80 to 90% going to be in. But then there's a big discussion. Who's going to be number 4? Who's that other team that can get into the college football playoff, assuming that 4 Big Ten teams get in, much like they did last season? I think the favorite is Illinois. A lot of people are giving a lot of praise, rightfully so, for Brett Bielema's squad. Right now, they are oozing experience and they have a favorable schedule, and that is a chef's kiss type of combination to maybe make their way to the college football playoff. Luke Altmaier is back at quarterback. They've got 4 starters coming back on the offensive line. The entire secondary is back. Xavier Scott, Miles Scott, Matthew Bailey, everybody back. And Aaron Henry, as the defensive coordinator, is really good at developing defensive backs. Like, he was a part of that staff in 2022. Ryan Walters was the defensive coordinator at that point, where you had Devin Witherspoon, where you had Sidney Brown, where you had all those guys kind of flying over the football field and all that. Like, you have Gabe Akis that's going to be coming off the edge from that kind of outside linebacker, defensive end type of spot as well. Like, there's a lot of really good experience, a lot of really good young players on a team that won 9 games in the regular season, losses to Penn State, Oregon, and Minnesota, and then they won that bowl game, of course, over South Carolina. So a 10-3 team making that next jump up, yeah, it's very feasible, obviously, that they could get to that point. I love Illinois. I just love Brett Bielema, the man who was born to do one thing and one thing only, and that's coach Big Ten football. You look at their schedule. No Penn State on the schedule, no Michigan on the schedule, and no Oregon on the schedule. You look at the toughest games for the Illini next season. September 20th, they go to Indiana. They get USC at home the very next week, and then October 11th, they get a home game in the Yellow Buck Trophy game against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Check out this finish to their season. At Washington, home against Rutgers, home against Maryland, at Wisconsin, home against Northwestern. That's certainly a lot of stretch where they could gain a lot of confidence possibly going into a college football playoff berth right now. They play the bottom 4 teams in the Big Ten from last season. Only Duke, Indiana, Rutgers, and Ohio State, that's 4 out of their 12, had 7 or more regular season wins from last season. You know, a lot of times when what needs to happen in order to make a run? You need your roster, certainly fairly in a pretty good spot, but maybe schedule more than anything, especially in these Power 2 schedules in the Big Ten and the SEC, is needed to really make a run. Let's talk about the other I school there in the Midwest. Let's talk about Indiana. I suppose there's Iowa too, but let's talk about the Indiana Hoosiers right now. You know, a lot of people are looking at Indiana. Oh, that was a great story last year. Cignetti taking the team from 3 wins all the way up to 11 wins, and that's great. But they couldn't get it done against the good teams on their schedule. And now Indiana's going to kind of take their seat yet again at the table that they've been occupying for a little bit. With that, I say, in honor of the retiring Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend, because Indiana has a really good roster. This roster in 2025 could certainly have won 11 games in 2024. There's an argument that this roster might be better this year than it was last year. You have some of these guys that are coming back that are they're in the system for a year, and they're going to continue to get better. They're going to continue to learn more, of course, in there as well. But the thing is, they have, at the very least, as good of a roster, but they have a much more difficult schedule this year. So, of course, that is going to get into the way. Like, I look at this team right now offensively. I'm really, really excited. Now, one big loss is co-offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach Tino Sinceri. So that's one thing to watch out for, but they do keep Mike Shanahan in there as their offensive coordinator, which I didn't think they would. I thought he would be a head coach at this point, but hey, good for him for remaining around Bloomington, Indiana. Like Fernando Mendoza, I think he's got a higher starting point than Curtis Rourke did in Bloomington, so I think that's going to be he's going to do really good within this offense. The leading receiver, Elijah Surratt, is back. Omar Cooper, they bring in Tyler Morris from Michigan. They bring in another wide receiver in Mekhi Jackson, who comes over from App State. That was a team that put up a lot of production. Like, they've got another team with a lot of good receivers. They've kind of plugged some holes on the offensive line by getting someone like Pat Coogan from Notre Dame, Zen Mikulski coming over from Ohio State. And then the defense, they've certainly kind of plugged some holes with the transfer portal as well. Like, when I look at Indiana, you know, Indiana's in a position where it's like, okay, great, we won 11 games last year. That's awesome. We want to be able to build on that and keep that success going. But here's the deal. They can't quite recruit at that top 25 level right now, and they have not been recruited. So it's not like you have recruits waiting in the wings to really develop and step up into these roles. They need to utilize the portal is probably their main source for bringing in new talent to fill starting roles, probably for like at least another 2 to 3 years. That's just how roster building is going to go, I think, for Indiana in the future. But, man, their portal class this year is really good. Their portal class last year was really good as well. You take a look at this schedule. Now, in order to be that 4th college football playoff team, you need to split this stretch. You need to go 2-2. Bad news is 3 of these games are on the road. You've got back-to-back weeks in late September, home against Illinois and at Iowa. And then later on in the season, October 11th, you go to Oregon. November 8th, you go to Penn State. Those are going to be 2 tremendously difficult games. Autzen Stadium, Beaver Stadium, 2 of the hardest environments to play in all of college football. So good luck to Indiana with that. I think if Indiana at 10-2 wants to get back into the playoff, I feel like they need to beat Illinois and Iowa in consecutive weeks. But that's going to be a tall task. That's going to be a tall task. I think both the Illini and the Hawkeyes are going to be pretty good teams, certainly next season. I want to talk about the Michigan Wolverines. Like, there is no doubt Michigan will have better quarterback play this year than they did last year. But just how much further can that quarterback play take them this upcoming season? Michigan is still going to look to smash. Even though they've got Mikey Keene transferring from Fresno State, even though they've got Super Frosh Bryce Underwood in there, they've got an offensive coordinator, I think that maybe more in the past, Chip Lindsey at North Carolina, that opened up the offense and maybe threw it around a little bit more. This is still a Sharon Moore team. This is still a team that's going to look to be physical. They've got good running, like Justice Haynes transferring from Alabama. You've got Jordan Marshall. We saw him kind of flash in the bowl game there for the Wolverines. Like, they've got really good backs yet again. The big question I have for Michigan is this. Is their offensive line going to give them the ability to just lean on people throughout the game, or throughout the season, excuse me? I think there are some questions up front on Michigan's offensive line. I think that's going to really determine, is this a team that can get back to the college football playoff, or is this a team that's going to be maybe just on the outside looking in of the college football playoff? Like, you look at their, let me first talk about their defense before I get into their schedule. I really like their front seven. I like their defensive line. I like what they're bringing back at linebacker with Ernest Hausman and Jayshawn Barham in the middle there. Rod Moore's coming off that injury back there at safety. We'll see. The secondary kind of struggled a little bit earlier in the season. We'll see if maybe another year of development gets them on the right track and gets them better. But I think that this is, at the very least, will be a good defense for the Wolverines. Now let's talk about this schedule. I look top to bottom. Only Ohio State feels much more talented than Michigan. And we know Michigan they're in the brains. They're in the brains of the Buckeyes. No question about that. There's lots of 50-50 type games. September 6th at Oklahoma, I think, is going to really determine a lot. Because in theory, you need to get to 10-2. If you lose to Oklahoma, that's a good defense. You got John Mateer transferring in there at quarterback. You lose to Oklahoma early, that puts a lot more pressure on you, certainly throughout the season. September 20th, they go to Nebraska. October 11th, they go to the West Coast to take on USC. October 11th, they play Washington. The rivalry game against Michigan State is on the road this year. So Michigan is going to have to be a team that's going to have to be really good in close games. Now, the good thing about that is the way they played last season. Did they lose some close games? Yes, they lost some close games, but they certainly won some close games. Look at what happened, of course, at the end of the year, how they were able to hang on in that rock fight against Ohio State. You look a little bit earlier on in the season, how they were able to overcome things and be able to beat USC. So this is a team that I think the way they play, I think that they can just make one more play, lean on you if that offensive line is certainly in the right spot, and maybe they're a team that can win some of these close games. They're going to need to in order to get to that 10-2 mark to get to the college football playoff. Out of all three of these teams, I feel best about Illinois. Like, if you haven't figured out a trend yet, I feel great about Penn State. I feel great about Illinois because of their experience. I think one thing that we've learned over the past 2 years with the Michigan situation, with the Ohio State situation, is experience really pays off. If you can load up to have an experienced team in a given year, even going back to the last year of the Pac-12 with that Washington team was a fairly experienced team. If you load up for that 1 year, it can certainly pay off. So I think Illinois is maybe that team that certainly leads the race. I could see Michigan certainly sliding into that role, and there's maybe some other teams outside of these three that could possibly fit into that as well. Last year during fall camp, Oregon and their media and creative team came out with this documentary titled That Team Out West, and it kind of ruffled some feathers a little bit with some teams in the Big Ten that are on the West Coast to say, no, we're that team out West, we're that team out West. But I think it's fairly certain, especially the way year one really went in the Big Ten, that Oregon at least as of right now, in the current slate of things, is that team out west. They are the dominant team on the West Coast, 13-0, Big Ten champions. This is a team that beat Ohio State during the regular season. They beat Penn State during the Big Ten championship. They beat Michigan during the regular season. They did everything that they were supposed to do to really come in and capture people's attention in year number one. I think a big Big Ten question that I have right now is someone going to step up and challenge Oregon on the West Coast? I'm going to talk about this year, but I'm also going to talk about the future as well. Let's start first with USC. USC is the team historically, if I'm looking at it, okay, who is that team out west historically? USC, of course, with their championships and their Heisman Trophy winners. They are a blue blood. They have an extremely rich history, and they're not going to be down forever. I think that's one thing that people need to understand. I really thought that 7 wins was the bottom, but then Lincoln Riley one-upped himself by achieving a 6-win season this past year. But in terms of 2025, I think the big question to see if USC can kind of step up to the challenge, and even this season, I believe that USC is the team that has as good a chance as any to maybe get at least in the same ballpark, or at least in the same stratosphere of where Oregon is sitting right now. I think for USC, a big key is how far can they ride Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane? Can they ride the Lemon and Lane train to success? I think that's as good a wide receiver duo as there is in the Big Ten right now. Now, once you get beyond the guys, there's not as much depth, I think, in the wide receiver room this year as there was last year. Can Jaden Mayava, who's going to be the starting quarterback for USC, is he going to be in a position to make good enough decisions consistently? Because remember, he certainly showed some flashes when he came in to be the starting quarterback at the end of last season, but he also made some bad decisions. A couple of pick sixes late in the game against Notre Dame really cost them a chance to upset the Irish at that point in season. That's a big thing for me, is that wide receiver combination. I think it could give a lot of teams a lot of problems in the Big Ten. And if Jaden Mayava can really get under this Lincoln Riley learning tree and really take a lot of development forward, that could be a combination that could give a lot of people problems. They're losing 3 guys on the offensive line, on an offensive line that wasn't great overall. I don't think there's been a ton of upgrades on the O-line personally. I think this defense is going to continue to take steps forward. They took a big step forward last year. We'll see how many steps forward that they're going to take this season. I'm not ultra keen on USC is going to surprise everybody and going to win 9 games or win 10 games. I honestly think that 2025 is a bridge to an extremely bright future in Los Angeles, 2026, 2027, and beyond. This recruiting class that they're putting forth right now, they are recruiting at an elite level. They are recruiting at a level that you would expect USC to be able to recruit at. Chad Bowden deserves all of the credit for that to happen. But, I say all of these things, and I still come back to Lincoln Riley. Maybe I'm just a Lincoln Riley hater. Maybe that's just what I am now. I wasn't at the beginning of last season, but maybe that's what I am now. All of the positive things that are happening in Los Angeles at USC, I still come back and I'm like, can Lincoln Riley win games in the Big Ten? Is this a team that can win battles in the trenches? Are they focused in the right spot? Is he good enough as a play caller? All of these things are still creeping into my mind. Is he a guy that can take a Jaden Mayava at quarterback and turn him into this great talent that he's produced at the quarterback position before? I have a lot of questions. I have some doubts creeping into my mind. I love about every other thing about USC except Lincoln Riley. It kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit right now. I'm gonna be honest with you, but I feel much better about USC in the future, kind of get into that level where Oregon is, than I feel about the 2025 season. Let's talk about the Washington Huskies. This is a sneaky team for 2025. Okay, you have Jed Fish, and you kind of have his background from an offensive perspective, an offensive coach. You got Damon Williams. I think Damon Williams is going to be a great quarterback this year. I'm really excited about what he could be. Now, I think they're a little bit better on the offensive line, but they need to be a lot better on the offensive line to really get the most out of Damon at the quarterback position. Jonah Coleman was a 1,000-yard running back last season. You got Denzel Boston, and then you bring in Amari Evans from Penn State. Like, there's some weapons on the offensive side of the ball. There's some things to get excited about this season in Seattle, and I kind of took a peek at their schedule, and I'm like, oh, there's some things fitting together here where if everything clicks in year 2 for Jedd Fisch, this could be a team that could give some people problems. But we're talking about getting up to where the Oregon Ducks, their arch rival, that hated team down south there on I-5 is. Like, that's where we need to get to. Washington can be maybe a sneaky, little bit of a scary team in 25. I don't think they're going to get to that level. Like, the thing we need to know about Washington, and I want to preface this by saying this. There's nothing wrong with this. Washington historically has been a team that's maybe rid the roller coaster a little bit. Like, they'll ride at 6 or 7 wins, and they'll go to 8, they'll go to 9, they'll go to 10, they'll peak up. But it's been hard over the course of time for Washington to maintain 9, 10, even 11 wins consistently over a 4 or 5 year period. We've seen Oregon has been able to do that, and we've seen USC has been able to do that. So honestly, I think Oregon and USC are the teams on the West Coast that are going to be able to achieve that type of consistent success. I think Washington is actually in a group maybe a little bit more towards UCLA, where maybe they can peak up a little bit, but I'm not sure if they can certainly stay at that level throughout the future. Although this team is better, I still think there's multiple steps from where Oregon is right now. But you can see where Jedd Fisch is certainly building this thing. A big talking point was Washington recently flipping 5-star offensive tackle Cody Green from Oregon to Washington. The Huskies are right now sitting with a top 25 class. So things are maybe, you talk about that roller coaster where maybe things went down after those 2 Kalen DeBoer years. Maybe they're slowly but surely building their way up for the Huskies over there in Seattle. For UCLA for this year, Nico's got to put the team on his back. Plain and simple. Nico, I think, can be a superstar quarterback, and he needs to be a superstar quarterback. For UCLA to, one, get to the postseason, get to a bowl game. They fell 1 game short last season. And number 2, be able to kind of rise up to that level that we're talking about. Like, this is a UCLA team that got Ohio State on their schedule. They got Penn State. They're going to go on the road to USC. They play Utah to kick off the season. Even like going on the road to UNLV, Dan Mullen's team there this year, even that's not the easiest thing in the world. So I don't think the schedule shapes up super well for UCLA, certainly to get to that level. And this is a team that loses a lot on defense. They had a handful of NFL draft picks. Like, you lose Jay Toia on the defensive line. Carson Schlesinger was the leading tackler in the Big Ten. Caden Medrano, Olafemi Oladejao. Like, you lose 5 seniors in the secondary. That's a lot to backfill when you maybe don't have a team that hasn't recruited as well as UCLA has. We can maybe blame part of that certainly on Chip Kelly. They got to go at Indiana as well. Like, I don't know if I see it now, and I don't know if I see it in the future for UCLA to really contend at that type of level. It's going to take a lot of resources. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, I think, to consistently be where Oregon is when you talk about some of these other teams on the West Coast. Last season's big story, Cinderella story, the Indiana Hoosiers. This is a team that won 3 games. Kurt Cignetti comes in, he cleans house, he brings in a bunch of transfer guys, production over potential, he says, and all of a sudden, this basketball school is in the college football playoff. And I think a lot of people are asking questions. It says, a lot of people want to know, all right, who's going to do it this year? Indiana did it last year. Who's going to be that team that maybe goes from worst to, maybe not quite first, but you get what I'm trying to say with that specific analogy? Or who's the team that maybe goes 4 or 5 win improvement and gets into the college football playoff? I want to make one thing perfectly clear, and this is probably pretty easy to say right now. I don't think there's going to be a team that's going to go worst to first. I don't think there's going to be a team that's going to have like a 7 or an 8 win jump, because the teams that fit into that right now are Purdue, sitting there at 1-11. It's the first year of Barry Odom. There's a bunch of transfers stopped. If you've heard me of this before, the state of Indiana, I thought Indiana, like last year, what they were bringing in with Cignetti, with his track record and how he can quickly turn around a team, I predicted them to go to 6-6. I thought that they would take a jump, but clearly they took a bigger jump than even I anticipated. With Purdue, I think it's going to be a little bit of a slower climb, but I certainly believe in what Barry Odom can provide there in West Lafayette, Indiana. Like Northwestern is a team that I think has some pieces. Preston Stone, Joseph Hyman, some players coming back on defense. Like, I think this is a team that can get to a bowl game, but not to that 9 or 10 win level, certainly. And I'm pretty down on Maryland. I'm not a big fan of where Maryland certainly sits in the grand scheme of things right now. So now that we've got that out of the way, the thing I'm looking towards is like, who's a 5-win or a 6-win regular season team that can make that jump into like a 10-win college football playoff type of place. So I look at some of these 5 or 6-win teams, like Wisconsin sitting there at 5 wins, and they have just an absolute murder show of a schedule. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, Wisconsin is a team that, like, if they had a more manageable schedule, maybe they could win 8 games. Maybe they can win 9 games. But that's not the case. It could be 2 consecutive years sitting back home during bowl season for Luke Fickell and the Badgers. There's a realistic chance of that happening. You look at Michigan State, who won 5 games. I know their schedule is fairly manageable, but I kind of look up and down the roster, and I'm not there. I can't talk myself quite into it for them to make that type of jump. Jonathan Smith is a builder. These are things that incrementally get better over time with a Jonathan Smith program like he was able to achieve over there at Oregon State. UCLA, I mentioned them before. I know they've got the superstar quarterback, but I don't think he has that much around him. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Nico to be able to do that. I'm looking for a little bit more of a complete team and a better schedule situation. USC is a team that's sitting out there. That was a 6-win team. That's a maybe. That's a maybe, because like outside of their games, you look at Notre Dame, you look at Oregon. I mean, you look at Michigan is at home, Illinois. I mean, maybe they can like split some of those games and get to 9-3 or 10-2. But man, going on the road to Illinois, Notre Dame, and Oregon, that's going to be really tough. And USC did not win close games last season. If they want to be able to make that improvement, that big jump under Lincoln Riley, they're going to have to learn to win some of these close games, and they didn't get a lot of experience doing that last season. I know some folks are going to hem and haw over this. When I was putting this graphic together and I was preparing this show, I was hem and hawing on the inside because I've said it this offseason. I'm like, well, I got to wait and see with Nebraska. I got to wait and see because, man, I've drank the Kool-Aid these past couple of off seasons, and I'm just sick of drinking the Kool-Aid, frankly. They got to go out there and prove it. But then when I'm putting this segment together, I'm like, who could be that team? And I'm like, it could be Nebraska. It actually could be Nebraska. If this is a team, once again, they got to kick these habits. They got to kick the habits from the Frost era. They got to kick some of these habits that have carried over into the early Matt Rule era as well. But let me explain why I think maybe Nebraska could be that team that was in the middle of the Big Ten last year that could maybe make that jump all the way towards maybe a 9 or even a 10-win season, maybe even a college football playoff berth right now. Let's start with their schedule. Their schedule is a big reason for it. This is a favorable schedule for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They have a neutral site game against the Big 12 Cincinnati Bearcats. But outside of that, when you look at true road games, they have a really tough one in November at Penn State. But their toughest true road game outside of that is an October 18th meeting against Minnesota. And those have been really, really tight games over the past few years. Michigan's at home. USC is at home. Iowa is at home. A tricky Michigan State game. All of those games are at home. You don't have Ohio State on the schedule. You don't have Oregon on the schedule. You don't have Illinois on the schedule. Like, okay, I kind of took a second look at this thing. I'm like, This is maybe actually shaping up pretty good for Nebraska right now. The thing about Nebraska, that's the schedule. Let's talk about personnel. The thing about Nebraska, I know Matt Rule came in his press conference. We want to be physical. We want to be a Big Ten football team. But goddamn, you got yourself a 5-star quarterback in his second year, and you got an offensive coordinator that's known for kind of opening up their offense in Dana Holgorsen. And you've got some weapons on the outside that I think really play into maybe this narrative that say, hey, maybe Nebraska could really open up this thing a little bit. And they're not as deep in the running back position once you get beyond Emmett Johnson. The passing game needs to emerge. Dylan Raiola needs to turn into that savior quarterback. Like this offseason is like a huge offseason to really determine what are we going to see out of Dylan Raiola. What kind of quarterback is he going to become, not only at Nebraska, but within his college career? Can he reach those high expectations that he had coming out of Buford, Georgia? I think there's some good pass catchers. I think there's some guys that can get open for Nebraska, like Ja'Cory Barney had 443 yards last year. Carter Nelson was recruited as a tight end out of Ainsworth, Nebraska, but they really moved him over to wide receiver last season. Janarian Bonner is another guy that was on this team last year. Like Dane Key transferring over from Kentucky, 715 yards and 2 scores last year. And Isaiah Hunter from Cal, 578 yards and 5 scores with the Golden Bears. Like, I kind of start to look at what this team might be and what this offense might look like. If this is an offense that can open it up, balance things out with this run game, and man, this offensive line has got to be better. This offensive line has to stay healthy, and this offensive line has got to be better. Like, if those things happen, this is a Nebraska team and a Nebraska offense that could maybe move the ball and do some things. The defense, you know, their front seven, there's a lot of change certainly up front. Like I've stated my reasons before why I'm not the biggest believer in Nebraska for 2025, but if Dylan can take the step up, if this passing offense really evolves like what we saw against Wisconsin last season, I know Wisconsin wasn't the greatest defense in the world, and specifically in the secondary last year, but if this is a passing offense that can really come alive and maybe the defense is just good enough, middle of the road, maybe that's enough to get through this schedule and get to that 9 or 10 win level. I know, Nebraska fans, you are sick of hearing about it this time of year, but that's the team that I was able to come up with in this specific commentary as to maybe who could be that Indiana team that could take a big, significant jump up in the win column this season. I want to make it perfectly clear that we might not know some of these answers to some of these questions for maybe another 5 months, maybe another 6 months until the end of the regular season, but I'm going to ask them anyway. Let me know your answers, what you think the answers to these questions will be in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next edition of Big Nation.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.